Don't go in there." The voice, sharp and desperate, sliced through the thick Georgia evening just as Daniel Mercer reached for the front door of his Buckhead estate. His hand hovered inches from the polished brass handle when he turned, startled. A skinny boy was sprinting barefoot across the stone driveway. He looked maybe 9, all elbows, ribs, and panic. His t-shirt was ripped, his jeans smeared with dirt and motor oil. A faded yellow knit cap, sun-bleached and unraveling at the edges, clung crookedly to his head as he ran, arms flailing like frantic warning flags. Daniel stepped back from the door, pulse jumping. What on earth? The kid skidded to a stop at the base of the porch steps, gasping for air. "Please, sir," he wheezed, trying to get his breath under control. "Don't open that door. There's something in your house, something bad." Daniel straightened, shoulders stiffening. His first instinct was doubt. His second was to call security and have the kid removed. But something in the boy's trembling urgency, the raw terror in his eyes, made him hesitate. "You're trespassing," Daniel said, his voice cool and controlled. "Who are you?" The boy twisted the hem of his shirt between his fingers and swallowed hard. "Malik," he said. "I sleep by your trash cans, behind those big blue flowers." He jerked his chin toward the edge of the property, where the privacy fence dipped behind a row of hydrangeas. Daniel's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about, Malik? What's in my house?" Malik glanced over his shoulder as if expecting shadows to step out of the trees. Then he leaned in and whispered, "2 men came last night. They broke in. I saw from where I was hiding. One had tools. He messed with something under your kitchen counter. They talked about the air." Daniel's stomach tightened. "What do you mean, the air?" Malik's voice dropped even lower. "One of them laughed and said, 'Let's see if a rich man can breathe money.' Then they left." He shifted from foot to foot, rubbing his arms. "I waited all night for you to come home. I didn't know what else to do." Daniel didn't move. The hair on the back of his neck rose, not quite fear yet, but a deep, crawling unease. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "State your emergency," the dispatcher asked. "Possible break-in," Daniel said. "I need police and fire at my home. Someone may have tampered with a gas line." Within minutes, sirens filled the quiet street. Soon, the estate swarmed with first responders. A stocky fire chief with graying hair and a no-nonsense tone walked out of the house, helmet tucked under his arm. "You were lucky, Mr. Mercer," he said. "There was a slow leak in one of your gas lines. Someone messed with the shutoff valve behind your main stove. You couldn't see it from outside at all." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Was it enough to cause an explosion?" The chief shook his head. "Not likely an explosion," he said. "But if you'd walked in and stayed more than a few minutes, the gas level in the air would have turned deadly. Most folks pass out before they realize anything's wrong. If you'd locked the door behind you—" He let the unfinished sentence hang. Daniel turned toward the small boy sitting silently on the marble steps. Malik's yellow hat was crumpled between his hands, his narrow shoulders shaking. A memory slammed into Daniel like a fist. A boy about that age, hollow-eyed and scared, slumped against a brick wall downtown. That had been his younger brother Jordan 13 years earlier. Daniel hadn't reached out. Jordan died 2 weeks later. He stepped over and crouched beside Malik. The boy tensed but didn't bolt. "Why'd you warn me?" Daniel asked quietly. "You could have just walked away." Malik shrugged, still staring at the floor. "I saw your picture once, in a newspaper," he murmured. Said you gave money to my old shelter, the one in Midtown. I remembered your face." Daniel blinked. "You lived at Horizon Haven?" Malik nodded. "Before they shut it down, before my mom left, I kept the picture." He dug into his pocket and pulled out a wrinkled newspaper clipping, handing it over with both hands. There Daniel was, 3 years younger, stiff in a suit beside an oversized check, smiling next to a director whose name he'd already forgotten. The headline screamed, "Tech Mogul Donates to Struggling Youth Shelter." Daniel remembered the backlash that had prompted it, the PR team insisting he pose for that photo. It had been damage control, nothing more. He looked back at Malik. "You hungry?" he asked. The boy gave a tiny nod. "Come inside," Daniel said. "We'll get you something to eat." Malik swallowed. "No more gas, right?" "No," Daniel replied. "They shut it off." Malik hesitated, then rose slowly, hat drooping in his hand as he followed Daniel through the front door. Neither noticed the invisible line they'd just crossed, from strangers divided by everything to two people sharing the same fragile air of second chances. Daniel no longer saw a vagrant kid, but a quiet, brave soul who'd saved his life. Give this kid a thumbs up for that courage and quick thinking. Before we roll on with what happens next, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching this from. You'd be surprised how many people sitting just a few blocks away from you might be hearing this same story at the exact same moment. Malik perched on the edge of a mahogany bar stool, legs dangling, unsure if he was allowed to touch anything. His small hands clutched the yellow cap in his lap. The granite counters gleamed under soft pendant lights, the room smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and roasted garlic. Daniel set a steaming plate of leftover pasta down. "Just spaghetti," he said. "No mushrooms. Hope that's all right." Malik gave a shy nod. "Looks fancy," he muttered. Daniel grabbed a bottle of spring water from the fridge and placed it beside the plate. The boy hesitated only a heartbeat before digging in, slow at first, then with a sharp, hungry urgency. Daniel leaned against the opposite counter, arms folded, letting the silence stretch while his brain replayed the last hour on a loop. A gas leak. Intentional. Someone had tried to kill him in his own pristine kitchen, and this kid, someone he'd never met, had kept him alive. Why? "You stayed at Horizon Haven?" Daniel asked quietly. Malik paused, sauce on his chin. "Yeah, when I was smaller," he said. "Mom dropped me there when she couldn't pay rent. Said she'd come back after she found work." Daniel waited. Malik didn't continue. "Did she?" Daniel asked softly. "Come back?" Malik shook his head and went back to eating. "They tried to put me in foster homes," he said. "I ran. I do better on my own. I sleep where nobody looks, behind dumpsters under loading docks, places people pretend they don't see." His tone was flat, like he was describing the weather. Daniel thought of his own childhood. Gated neighborhoods, private academies, a driver waiting in a black sedan every afternoon. He'd never gone to bed hungry, never feared the wrong alley, and still he'd failed Jordan. His brother had spiraled into addiction, homelessness, illness. Daniel had written checks, paid for rehab, but never sat and listened. He'd skipped the hospital, showed up only for the funeral. "Why'd you keep that article?" Daniel asked. "The picture of me?" Malik shrugged. "You looked nice in it," he said simply. "Like maybe you actually cared." There was no sarcasm, just a worn-out kind of hope. Daniel turned away, rinsing a clean dish. "That donation," he said, "wasn't what it looked like. I did it to fix bad press. I never even visited." Malik chewed slower. I still thought maybe you were different, he said. Daniel stared at the sink, throat tight. After everything this kid had survived, how could he still choose hope? After a beat, Daniel asked, "Where'd you sleep last night?" "In the little space behind the trash cans," Malik answered. "It's warm there, smells bad, but it's better than some places." Daniel exhaled slowly. "You said you saw 2 men. Did you recognize them?" Malik shook his head. "They wore hoodies," he said. "One had a flashlight, the other just watched." "Did they say anything else?" Daniel pressed. Malik looked up. One of them said, "He's gonna sleep real deep tonight." That's when I knew it was bad. That's when I stayed. Daniel nodded slowly. "You waited until I came home." "Well, that's a long night." Malik shrugged, eyes dropping back to his plate. "I didn't want you to die," he said. 5 simple words that hit harder than any accusation. A child with no bed, no food, no safety had stayed not to steal or beg, but to warn a stranger. Daniel cleared his throat, unsettled. "You're not going back out there tonight," Daniel said. Malik froze. "You mean I can stay? Just for tonight?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "We'll figure out the rest in the morning." Malik stared at the table, fighting a small private smile. After dinner, Daniel showed him the guest room. Small, but warm, with a real bed and a soft nightlight glowing in the corner. Malik hovered at the doorway, eyes wide as he took everything in like it might vanish if he blinked. "Fresh towels are in the bathroom," Daniel said. "Shower's yours. I'll leave a t-shirt outside the door." Malik blinked. "You're really nice for a rich guy." Daniel tried to smirk. "Don't spread that around. I've got a reputation to protect." Malik's laugh was quick and startling. Later, Daniel sat alone in his study, the news murmuring on mute. On screen, grainy security footage showed the moment Malik grabbed his attention at the door. The ticker read, "CEO targeted in gas tampering incident, police investigating sabotage." Daniel muted it again and looked at the newspaper clipping, remembering a man named Leonard Price shouting in the lobby months ago, eyes wild with grief. Leonard had shouted, "You took my house and my job. What do I tell my boy when he asks why we sleep in a car?" Daniel had waved him off, called security, and returned to his agenda. What if it had been Leonard tonight? The thought chilled him. He opened his laptop and typed, "Leonard Price, South Atlanta eviction, complaints." This didn't feel random anymore. Upstairs, the hallway light dimmed as Malik curled beneath a warm blanket for the first time in months. He set his yellow hat on the nightstand beside a glass of water and whispered, "Please don't make me leave tomorrow." He didn't know Daniel was downstairs, eyes burning from the screen, already sketching a plan to protect Malik and finally confront the ghosts he'd ignored. Daniel woke earlier than usual. The house felt different, wrapped in a strange, heavy quiet. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the hardwood as pale sunlight crept across it. Something in him had shifted. After a quick shower and a navy flannel and jeans, he stepped out and caught the smell of toast. Actual toast. He almost laughed. The toaster never got used. His housekeeper didn't arrive until noon. Daniel headed downstairs cautiously. Malik stood at the counter, awkwardly spreading butter with a plastic knife. The t-shirt hanging from his thin frame was 2 sizes too big. He'd rolled the sleeves, but one cuff still swallowed his hand. Daniel recognized it. The shirt had belonged to Jordan. Malik turned, eyes bright. "Morning," he said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect you up this early." "I was hungry." Malik answered plainly. "And you said I could stay, so I figured I could make toast and not get yelled at." Daniel huffed. "You figured right." The boy relaxed a little and slid an extra slice onto a second plate. "You want some?" They sat side by side at the island, chewing in an easy silence. For a fleeting second, it felt like something borrowed from a life Daniel never had. A simple morning, no schedule, no performance. When they finished, he leaned back on his stool. "I need to ask you something serious, Malik." The boy froze mid-sip of water. "Okay," he said cautiously. "Those two men from last night," Daniel said. "If I showed you some photos, do you think you could recognize either of them?" Malik's brow wrinkled. "Maybe," he said slowly. "I didn't see their faces good. One had a scar near his eye, though, and he kind of walked funny, like he had a small limp on one side." Daniel's heart stuttered. "That's more detail than I expected," Daniel murmured. "I might have a name. Leonard Price. Mean anything to you?" Malik shook his head. "No, but one of them said something like, 'He owes me his life.'" Daniel leaned forward. "You're sure?" Malik nodded. "They said it while laughing. One of them had a deep voice, like somebody who smokes a lot." Daniel pushed away from the counter and disappeared into his office, returning with his laptop. "I need you to look at something," he said. He pulled up an archived report from a year back, a protest outside Mercer Urban Group. In the middle of the crowd stood a man with a sunburned neck and a scar under his right eye. Malik pointed immediately. "That's him!" Daniel stared at the screen. Leonard Price. Former electrician. He'd stormed the office once, demanding answers. Daniel hadn't even bothered to come out. His assistant called security while he signed papers in another room. The incident got buried in legal files and polite emails. Leonard, apparently, had not forgotten. Daniel snapped the laptop shut. Malik watched him carefully. "You okay?" the boy asked. "No," Daniel admitted. "I was supposed to help people. I told myself building condos meant progress, but maybe all I built were gravestones with marble countertops." Malik didn't fully grasp the metaphor, but he felt the heaviness in Daniel's voice. Daniel looked like someone seeing the wreckage of his own choices for the first time and realizing he'd been standing in it. Later that morning, Daniel called a retired investigator he'd used during a messy merger. "I need everything on a man named Leonard Price," he said. "Background, last address, any complaints against Mercer Urban Group?" "Give me a few hours," the man replied. Daniel hung up and looked at Malik. "Let's go for a drive." In the quiet Lexus, Malik pressed his nose to the window. "I've never been in a car this quiet," Malik said, eyes wide. "Can't even hear it breathing." "That's the idea," Daniel replied, but he smiled despite himself. They pulled up to a small community center in South Atlanta, across from a fenced-off lot where a row of old houses had once stood. Now it was gravel and a sign. "Future site of the Mercer residences." Malik stared out at the empty land. "People used to live there?" he asked. "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "A lot of families. Leonard's was one of them." Malik frowned. "What happened to everybody?" Daniel swallowed. "I happened. We bought the land, promised jobs and nice shops and tax money. But the people here couldn't wait for promises. They just got pushed out." Malik was quiet for a long beat. "You didn't know it'd be like this?" he asked. Daniel stared at the lot. "I knew," he said. "I just decided it wasn't my problem." The words tasted bitter. Later, back at the house, Malik curled up on the couch with a book from the shelf while Daniel returned to his study to wait for the investigator's report. The report landed in his inbox an hour later. Leonard Price, former electrician, single father, evicted 16 months ago. 2 appeals, both denied. Car registered in his name, impounded 3 weeks back. No close family, no current job. A sealed complaint sent to Mercer Urban Group over a year ago, subject line, wrongful displacement. It had never reached Daniel, marked non-urgent, quietly archived. Daniel stared at the screen, jaw tight. The intercom crackled softly. "Mr. Mercer?" Malik's voice came tentative. "Yeah? I think I left my hat in the guest room. Can I grab it?" Daniel felt something loosen. "Of course," he said. As the line clicked, he realized he'd almost died for someone's revenge, and lived because a child trusted a staged photo of him. By evening, Daniel sat in his study surrounded by boxes dragged up from storage. Files labeled community feedback, eviction claims, relocation hearings. They'd collected dust in the basement, stamped resolved but never really seen. He opened one marked Price, Leonard. Inside was a letter scanned from a library. Leonard wrote about his 9-year-old son sleeping in their car, still believing men like Daniel meant, well. Leonard begged for mercy, for a little more time. "My boy still asks why we sleep in the car," one line read. "I tell him men like you don't mean harm. Please don't make me a liar." Daniel rubbed his eyes. He remembered the glowing headline about revitalization and new jobs. Downstairs, Malik hummed off key to himself, breaking the heavy spell around the desk. Daniel followed the sound to the sunroom. Malik was curled in a corner chair, flipping through a book of maps. "You like geography?" Daniel asked. Malik shrugged. "I like places," he said. "Places where things are better than here." Daniel sat across from him. "What do you mean, better?" Malik picked at the page. "Places where moms don't disappear. Where people don't pretend you're invisible." Daniel's chest tightened. "You shouldn't have had to know that kind of world," he said. Malik glanced up. "But I do." Silence settled between them. Daniel cleared his throat. "I owe a lot of people an apology, Malik. Maybe more." He pulled a worn photo from his wallet. "This is my brother, Jordan. He was on the street, too. I didn't help him in time." Malik studied the picture. Jordan looked younger than Daniel, smile wild and tired all at once, eyes bright with hurt. Malik glanced from the photo to Daniel. "That why you didn't walk away from me?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "That's exactly why," he said. "I can't undo what I didn't do for him, but I can choose differently with you." The next morning, Daniel called his attorney. "I want to find Leonard Price," he said. "Not to press charges, to talk." The lawyer sighed. "That's highly unusual, Daniel." "Do it anyway," Daniel replied. When he hung up, he scrolled through old emails until he found a contact from the Horizon Haven fundraiser. A social worker named Maria Ramirez. He dialed. "Miss Ramirez, this is Daniel Mercer. I need records," he said. "Kids who went through Horizon Haven, placements, especially one named Malik." She sounded surprised, then cautious. "That's not a call I expected," she said. "But yes, we can talk. Come by this afternoon." A few hours later, Daniel and Malik entered her midtown office, lined with kids' drawings and fading posters. Maria rose from her desk with a warm, tired smile. "Malik," she said softly, bending a little. "You've gotten taller." He blinked. "You remember me?" She nodded. "We always remember the quiet ones." She retrieved a thick manila folder. Malik was placed with 3 foster families after his mother left, she explained. He ran away from the last one. That was about 9 months ago. Daniel glanced at Malik. "Why'd you run?" he asked. Malik stared at his shoes. "They didn't really talk to me," he said. "They just fed me and made me sleep in this room with paint peeling and a lock on the outside." Maria's jaw tightened. "Unfortunately, that's not uncommon," she said quietly. "The system does what it can, but kids fall through." Daniel took a breath. "I want to petition for temporary guardianship," he said. Maria blinked, pen pausing over her notes. "That's a significant step, Mr. Mercer." "I don't care," he replied. "He saved my life. I'm not letting him vanish back into a file cabinet." She studied him for a moment. "We'll need a home study, background check. You know the process." "Start it today," Daniel said. Maria nodded slowly. "I'll begin the paperwork." On the drive home, Malik was unusually quiet, staring out at the traffic. Daniel finally asked, "You okay?" Malik shrugged. "You really want me to stay?" "Yes," Daniel said, "as long as you want." Malik swallowed. "Even if I don't belong in houses like yours?" "You belong where someone sees you," Daniel replied. That night, after Malik had fallen asleep, Daniel's phone buzzed. The investigator's voice crackled through. "We found Leonard," he said. "He's in Decatur staying with a former co-worker. Seems unstable. Lost custody of his son last year." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Text me the address." The next morning, he drove there alone, leaving Malik at home with the housekeeper and a stack of pancakes. The house was tired, front porch sagging like it was exhaling. A man sat on the steps, cigarette dangling from his fingers, scar catching the gray light. His eyes were tired but hard. Leonard Price. Daniel climbed the walkway. "Mr. Price," he said. Leonard stood. "You're a long way from your palace, Mercer." "I came to talk," Daniel replied. "Maybe ease my conscience." Leonard snorted. "You came to make yourself feel better." "Maybe," Daniel said. "But mostly I came to tell you that you were right." Leonard took a drag, smoke curling around his face. "You stole my home, my job. My kid doesn't trust me anymore. He says I look like a ghost." Daniel swallowed. "Words don't fix eviction," Leonard added. "You know that, right?" Daniel didn't argue. There was no defense worth offering. He just nodded. "I know," he said quietly. For a moment, only distant traffic filled the space between them. Then Leonard sank back onto the step, cigarette ember glowing. "You got 10 minutes, he muttered. Daniel sat beside him, not as a CEO and a victim, but as 2 fathers who'd both failed someone. Leonard stared at the cracked concrete, flicking ash into the weeds. "I begged your people," he said, voice rough. "Begged for a meeting, for mercy, anything. My boy was coughing from mold in that place, and they told me I'd be relocated." He laughed without humor. "You know what that meant? A move-out date and a lock change. No one cared where we landed. I took extra shifts," Leonard went on. "Told them I'd help with the wiring on your fancy new condos for free if it bought me a week. They laughed. Security hauled me out before I even finished talking." Daniel exhaled. "I remember the report," he said. "But I never read your letter, not until yesterday." Leonard glanced at him sharply, disbelief etched in every line. "You didn't read it because you didn't have to," Leonard said. "That's the kind of power you walk around with. You get to ruin people's lives without even noticing. It's just another file to you, another signed form. For us, it's everything." Daniel didn't look away this time. You're right, he said. I can't argue with any of that. Leonard shook his head. So what now? You write a big check and call it even? He scoffed. Daniel held his gaze. I know there's no fixing this, he said. Nothing gives you back those nights in the car, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't try to do something. Leonard's eyes narrowed. Why now? He asked. Why suddenly grow a conscience? Daniel hesitated, then answered. Because I almost died, he said. And the only reason I didn't is a kid sleeping behind my trash cans who kept a newspaper photo of me because he thought I looked kind. I can't explain why that changes everything. It just does. Leonard looked away. Daniel pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I'm starting a fund, he said. Not just money, Daniel continued. Housing, job training, legal help. I want your voice in it. Real input. No cameras, no speeches. Leonard took the paper, staring at it like it might explode. My son's in foster care, he said quietly. Won't talk to me, thinks I blew everything. Daniel nodded. Then maybe we start there. Leonard's jaw worked. You help me get him back. If that's what you want, Daniel said, yes. Leonard studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. You get one shot, he muttered. Don't waste it. That's all I need, Daniel replied. As he walked back to his car, the air felt heavier. It wasn't forgiveness on his shoulders. It was the start of penance, and he chose not to shrug it off. That evening, back at the house, Malik was out in the backyard, bare feet pressing into the cool grass as he traced crooked shapes in the dirt with a broken stick. Daniel watched from the patio, nursing coffee that had long gone lukewarm. How'd it go with Leonard? Malik asked quietly, eyes still down. Rough, Daniel said, but necessary. Malik nodded once. Is he mad at you? Malik finally asked, abandoning the stick and shuffling closer. He has every right to be, Daniel answered, but he heard me out. Malik stabbed the stick into the ground like planting a tiny flag, then wandered over to the steps. You gonna help him now? He asked. Daniel nodded. Him, his kid, and anyone else we pushed aside. Malik dropped onto the patio step beside him. Good, he said simply. That's what heroes do. Daniel huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. I'm nobody's hero, Malik. The boy leaned gently against his shoulder anyway. You're trying, he said. Most people don't. That's kind of what makes you one. Daniel stared out over the yard, oddly humbled by the child's certainty. The next morning, Daniel met again with Maria Ramirez, the social worker from Horizon Haven. This time, Malik sat beside him in the office, clutching his yellow cap like a life preserver. Daniel slid a stack of completed forms across the desk. Emergency guardianship, he said. Maria scanned them, eyebrows lifting. We rushed your background check, she said. I've never seen anyone move this fast, especially someone with your title, she added. Daniel shrugged. Titles can change, he said. Malik twisted the brim of his hat tighter. When the last signature dried, Maria produced a temporary guardianship order and pushed it toward Daniel. Malik stared at the paper, confusion and hope warring on his face. What's that mean? He whispered, voice trembling at the edges. Daniel crouched so they were eye level. It means you're not just a guest anymore, he said. Malik's eyes went shiny. For a second he didn't move. Then he suddenly lunged forward, arms flinging around Daniel's neck with surprising strength. Daniel hugged him back, steady and sure. They left the office without many words, the quiet between them full and strangely weightless. That afternoon, instead of calling a press conference at City Hall or inside Mercer Urban Group's glass tower, Daniel stood on the empty South Atlanta lot where the old houses once stood. No suit, no tie, just jeans, rolled sleeves, and a visible pulse in his throat. Cameras crowded near a portable podium, red lights blinking like watchful eyes. "We put these luxury units here to lift the skyline," he began, voice ringing across the gravel. "But we dragged down the dignity of the people who were here first. That's on me." Shutters snapped. Across the street, Leonard stood with arms folded, face unreadable. Daniel continued. "Starting today, Mercer Urban is launching the Second Wind project, aimed at rebuilding trust and housing together. Affordable units, on-site support, legal advocates, all shaped by the families who were displaced," Daniel said. He glanced back at Malik, standing a few paces behind him. "This is Malik," he added. "He saved my life. He reminded me that the people we overlook often carry the truths we most need." I refused to look away again. Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. When the event wrapped, some people clapped out of politeness, others with real conviction. Daniel barely noticed. He was watching Leonard, who gave him the smallest nod before turning away, shoulders a little less rigid than before. That night, Daniel stood by Malik's bed, tucking the blanket around him as the boy held his hat like always. "Can I stay forever?" Malik asked. Daniel brushed a hand through Malik's hair. "As long as you want," he said softly. "This is home now." Malik smiled, sinking into sleep. "Then I'm done running," he murmured. Daniel stayed long after the boys' breathing grew even, listening to the house settle around them. The mansion, once hollow and echoing, felt anchored by something he hadn't known he needed: purpose. 3 days later, early sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Daniel's estate, laying golden stripes across the marble floor. The place had never buzzed with this much movement. Contractors dropping off inspection reports, new staff onboarding packets stacked on the counter, emails pinging from nonprofits eager to partner with the Second Wind project. Malik sat at the island, sipping orange juice, banana half-eaten. He watched Daniel pace the living room in dark jeans and a black sweater, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, those units stay permanently rent-controlled," Daniel snapped. "No exceptions." He paused, listening. "I'm not interested in squeezing the same people we already hurt," he said, ending the call with a frustrated exhale. Malik tilted his head. "Didn't sleep much, did you?" he asked. "Barely," Daniel admitted. Malik grinned. "You talk in your sleep." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Yeah?" "You kept mumbling. Ceiling fans in every unit or I'm out," Malik said, fighting a laugh. Daniel chuckled despite himself. "Sounds like me." A knock at the front door cut through their banter. Daniel opened it to find Leonard in a faded but clean jacket, folder tucked under his arm. "You said you wanted my input," Leonard said, wary but calm. "You serious about that?" Daniel stepped aside. "I am. Come in." Malik perked up immediately. "Hey, you're the guy with the scar," he blurted. Leonard blinked, then gave a small, crooked smile. "That'd be me," he said. Daniel gestured toward the dining table. "Let's talk in here," he said, motioning them both inside. Malik hovered near the doorway. "You want me to leave?" he asked. Daniel shook his head. "No, you stay," he said firmly. Leonard shot him a questioning look. "He deserves to see what rebuilding actually looks like," Daniel added. Leonard nodded once, then opened the folder. Inside were sketches, bullet point notes, and hand-drawn diagrams of how the neighborhood might return without repeating history. "We need a daycare right on site," Leonard said, tapping a page. "Most single parents around here juggle 2 shifts, and corner stores that actually take EBT, not overpriced boutiques." Daniel jotted notes beside each suggestion. "And no gated entrances," Leonard insisted. "Last thing we need are fences cutting neighbors off from each other. Give people porches instead, places to sit and actually talk." "I like porches," Malik mumbled around a mouthful of toast he'd carried in. Leonard glanced over, his expression softening. "Me too, kid," he said. They worked through the folder line by line, losing track of time. When they finally reached the last page, Daniel pushed back his chair and stood. "Then we build it your way," he said, holding out his hand. Leonard studied him for a long second, then finally clasped his hand in a firm shake. A truce, fragile but real. As Leonard headed for the door, Malik walked him out. "You gonna see your son soon?" Malik asked. Leonard paused, the question hanging between them. "I hope so," he said. "Might not be today, but I'm trying." Malik nodded. "He probably misses you." Leonard swallowed, eyes flicking away. "Yeah," he said softly. "I miss him, too." The door clicked shut behind him. That afternoon, Daniel drove Malik to Horizon Haven, the shelter that used to be a line item on his charity reports. Now, it was different. Purchased outright under the Second Wind Foundation, scaffolding wrapped the exterior while crews hammered, painted, and rewired every tired corner. Therapists and advocates moved through the halls in sneakers and cardigans instead of stiff suits. "This place looks nicer," Malik whispered, fingers tightening around Daniel's hand. "It's going to be," Daniel said. "We're naming that new wing after you." Malik stopped short. "Me?" he squeaked. Daniel nodded. "The Malik Center for kids who never got a fair shot but offered one anyway." Color rushed to Malik's cheeks as he stared at the freshly mounted letters waiting to be unveiled. "Can it have bean bags?" he asked, voice small. Daniel laughed. "It'll have bean bags, comics, everything." That night, back home, Daniel was reading to Malik when the boy suddenly interrupted. "Why didn't you help your brother?" The question landed quietly, but cut deeper than any accusation. Daniel closed the book slowly. "Because I was selfish," he admitted. "I thought wiring money solved everything. I told myself if I didn't see Jordan's pain, it couldn't drag me under." Malik nodded with surprising seriousness. "People forget that hurt doesn't need permission," he said. Daniel blinked, throat tight. "You're right," he whispered. Malik shifted against the pillows, thinking. "Maybe," Malik said. "You helping me now is kinda like helping him too." Daniel looked at him, eyes suddenly burning. He set the book aside and rested his hand over Malik's. "Maybe it is," he said. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, gentle but insistent. The house, once sterile and pristine, now held a kind of human warmth Daniel had never bought or planned. The next morning, Daniel was mid-call with a city councilman when Malik shuffled into the study, hugging a small beat-up cardboard box. "1 second," Daniel said into the phone, then wrapped up the conversation. "What have you got there?" he asked. Malik carefully opened the flaps. Inside were 2 photos, a one-armed plastic dinosaur, a crinkled snack pack, and the folded clipping of Daniel's article. "My treasure box," Malik said proudly. Daniel hung up the phone completely. "That's everything you own?" he asked gently. "It was," Malik said with a shrug. Daniel studied the little pile, then nodded. Let's add something. He pulled a heavy keychain engraved with the Mercer crest from his desk drawer and dropped it into Malik's palm. The metal gleamed softly in the light. "This real?" Malik asked, turning it over. "Solid," Daniel said. "What's it for?" "The front door," Daniel answered. "Any door in this house. It means you belong here." Malik's smile came slow, cautious at first, then brightening to something fierce and real. In that moment, the boy who once slept behind overflowing dumpsters quietly became something new. Not a guest. Family. As the sun climbed higher, they sat shoulder to shoulder on the rug, rearranging the contents of the little box together. One man learning how to show up, one boy learning how to believe that someone would. It was a quiet Sunday when Daniel found himself standing outside a church he hadn't entered since his mother's funeral nearly 20 years earlier. The small brick building on Auburn Avenue leaned gently with age, stained glass windows glowing with fractured light. Old wooden pews were visible through the doors. Malik stood beside him, squinting up at the bell tower. "You used to come here?" he asked. "When I was a kid," Daniel said, "back when I confused silence with peace instead of avoidance." Malik frowned. "What's that mean?" "It means I used to sit here and pray for people I didn't have the courage to talk to," Daniel said, half smiling. He nodded toward the entrance. "Come on, there's someone I want you to meet." Inside, Reverend Elise Turner stood near the altar, adjusting the hymn list. Her short silver curls caught the morning light. Her gaze, sharp and kind, missed nothing. She'd known Daniel and Jordan since they were rowdy boys in pressed shirts, and she'd been the last person to visit Jordan before he overdosed. "Well, look what the stained glass dragged in," she said, folding her arms. "Daniel Mercer without a donation envelope." Daniel winced playfully. "Figured I owed more than money this time." Elise's eyes shifted to Malik. "And this young man. This is Malik," Daniel said. "He's the reason I'm still breathing." Malik gave a small wave. "Hi, ma'am." "Polite, too," Elise said, stepping closer and crouching to his level. "You've got good instincts, Malik. Don't let the world talk you out of them." Malik nodded, unsure what to say. Elise straightened, turning back to Daniel. "You're not here just to feel nostalgic, are you?" Daniel shook his head. "I'm rebuilding Horizon Haven," he said. "I need someone who understands healing better than I understand balance sheets." Elise studied him, expression softening. "You finally ready to listen?" she asked. "I'm trying to be," Daniel answered. She rested a hand on the altar. "I'll help," she said, "but this can't be another photo op. These kids need consistency, not headlines." "Deal," Daniel said without hesitation. As they walked back outside, Malik tugged on his sleeve. "She's kinda scary," he whispered. Daniel grinned. "She's exactly the kind of scary we need." When they returned home, the phone rang as they stepped through the door. Daniel answered, his features tightening. "Yes, this is Daniel." "Wait, say that again?" he asked, voice low. He hung up and turned to Malik. "That was Maria," he said. "They located Leonard's son, Jonah. He's in a group home over in Monroe Heights. Staff think he's ready to see his dad." Malik's eyes widened. "You gonna tell Leonard?" "Right now," Daniel said. They drove to Leonard's cramped rental tucked behind a tire shop, the paint peeling from the doorframe. Leonard opened the door in a worn t-shirt, coffee mug in hand, eyes still foggy with sleep. "Jonah," he blurted before Daniel could speak. Daniel nodded. "They found him. You can see him, but it has to be a supervised visit at first." Leonard exhaled sharply, setting his mug aside. "He hates me," he said. He's scared, Daniel replied. Scared isn't the same as gone. Leonard looked away. What if I mess it up again? He whispered. Malik stepped out from behind Daniel. You already didn't quit, he said. That counts. Leonard gave a faint, crooked smile. Smart kid, he murmured. Daniel clapped a hand on his shoulder. This is a second chance, he said. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to show up. The days that followed moved like a slow, turning tide. Renovations at Horizon Haven accelerated. Volunteers drifted in daily. Retired teachers, trauma counselors, ex-residents who'd heard whispers about the rebuild on message boards and flyers. Malik spent every afternoon there, stocking shelves with donated books, lining up toys, dabbing fresh paint on walls that once peeled with neglect. He rarely spoke much, but he watched everything, soaking in each detail. One afternoon, Daniel found him alone in the Malik Center, staring up at the plaque bearing his name. You don't have to pretend you're okay all the time, Daniel said, sitting beside him on the floor. Malik's fingers tightened around the edge of his hoodie. I know, he said softly. It just feels like if I stop smiling, somebody's gonna send me back, Malik confessed. Daniel shook his head. No one's sending you backward, he said. All of this, he gestured around the bright room, is forward, you included. Malik leaned against him quietly, letting the words sink in. That evening, Daniel stood in his office, staring out at the city's glittering skyline. The towers he once measured in quarterly profits now looked different, less like trophies, more like questions. His assistant buzzed in. Reporter from the Journal downstairs, she said, wants a feature on the boy who saved the CEO. Daniel pressed the intercom. Tell her no, he said. But if she wants to write about Horizon Haven and the kids there, we'll make time. He walked down the hall and paused at Malik's doorway. The boy was fast asleep, curled around a threadbare teddy bear Daniel didn't remember buying. Probably donated, probably priceless to Malik. Daniel switched off the light and turned toward the framed photo of Jordan hanging nearby, his brother laughing, whole from another world. For what it's worth, Daniel murmured, I'm finally listening. In that not-so-quiet house, no longer echoing with emptiness, Daniel finally understood. Presence wasn't about grand gestures. It was about staying, about answering when someone whispered instead of waiting for them to scream. 2 weeks after Horizon Haven reopened, Leonard saw Jonah again. The visit happened in a sunlit room at the Monroe Heights group home. Walls painted a soft, hopeful blue. No cameras, no reporters, just a scratched table, 2 mismatched chairs and a box of tissues nobody touched, but everyone noticed. Daniel had arranged the visit and now waited in the hallway with Malik, sitting on a plastic bench. You think Jonah's gonna talk to him? Malik asked, swinging his legs. Daniel exhaled. I don't know, he said, but showing up matters more than perfect words. Inside, Leonard stood near the window while Jonah entered, lanky and guarded, hands buried in his hoodie pockets. He hovered by the door, saying nothing. Leonard didn't rush him. After nearly a full minute, Leonard said, You look taller. Jonah shrugged. They feed us good here, he muttered. Leonard nodded. That's good. Silence stretched, fragile but unbroken. Then Jonah asked, eyes fixed on the floor, Why didn't you come sooner? Leonard's voice cracked. Because I thought I'd already lost you, he said honestly. Jonah didn't answer, but he also didn't walk away. For now, that was enough. Later that evening, Daniel and Malik stopped at a tiny diner off I-75. Checkered floors, squeaky booths, smell of coffee soaked into everything. Malik demolished a towering stack of pancakes. Syrup streaked across his plate. "You know you can order something else," Daniel said, amused. "You don't have to pick whatever's cheapest." Malik grinned through a mouthful. "This isn't cheap," he said. "This is perfect." Daniel sipped lukewarm coffee and stared out the window at the endless stream of taillights sliding past. "We're opening 3 more community centers in the next year," Daniel said quietly. "South Fulton, East Point, maybe one near the airport." Malik nodded like he'd been expecting it. "You scared?" he asked. "A little," Daniel admitted. "Not of doing it wrong." Malik shrugged. "You won't," he said. "You got people now." The words settled deeper than the coffee ever could. Back home, Daniel opened an email from the mayor's office. They wanted to honor his extraordinary service at an upcoming Civic Awards night. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed the laptop without replying. Instead, he walked down the hall to Malik's room. The boy sat cross-legged on the bed, flipping through a new photo album Daniel had given him. "Who's this?" Malik asked, pointing to a faded snapshot of a younger Daniel with an arm slung around a grinning teenager who clearly wasn't Malik. "That's Jordan," Daniel said, sitting beside him. "My brother. Last picture we took before he left." Malik studied the photo. "You think he'd be proud of you now?" Daniel considered. "I think he'd ask what took me so long." Malik smiled and leaned against his side. "I'm just glad you showed up anyway," he said. The next morning, Daniel took Malik to a small park downtown. Just a patch of green with a busted fountain and a rusted jungle gym. Kids raced barefoot through the grass while grandparents sat on benches, trading stories over paper cups of coffee. Near the edge of the field, a woman sat with an old guitar, singing softly. Her voice shook, but carried a familiar tenderness that stopped Malik cold. He tugged Daniel's sleeve. "That's her," he whispered. Daniel frowned. "Who?" "My mom," Malik said. The words landed heavy and slow. Daniel looked closer. The woman was thinner now, older, her face mapped with worry but unmistakable. "You sure?" Daniel asked. Malik nodded. "I remember her hands," he said. "She used to sing when she braided my hair." Daniel's chest tightened. "Do you want to go over there?" Malik hesitated, heart pounding in his throat. "Not yet," he said. "Can we just sit a minute?" So they sat, watching her sing to strangers and empty air. Nearly an hour passed before Malik finally stood, legs shaking. He crossed the grass, each step heavy with years of waiting. Daniel stayed on the bench, giving him space. The woman looked up, startled, guitar sliding from her lap. Then she reached out, hands trembling, and Malik folded into her arms. From the bench, Daniel saw only shaking shoulders and shining tears. When Malik returned, his face was damp but brighter. "She's been clean 6 months," he whispered. "She didn't come back 'cause she thought she'd ruin my life." Daniel nodded. "Do you want to see her again?" Malik clutched his yellow cap. "Yeah," he said, "but I still want to live with you." Daniel smiled. "You're allowed to have both. You don't have to choose." That night, in his room, Malik tucked a photo into his treasure box, a picture of him and his mother by the cracked fountain. Beside it, he placed a pebble he'd picked up earlier. "I think this means things don't stay broken forever," he said. Daniel pulled the blanket over him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Not if someone's willing to fix it," he replied. In the hush that followed, beneath a roof once built on distance, their lives kept threading themselves together, carefully, stubbornly, with every shared meal, every hard conversation, every second chance. A few weeks later, the ceremony at Horizon Haven wasn't supposed to be extravagant. Daniel insisted on that. No red carpet, no velvet ropes, just folding chairs and a white canopy out front. A warm breeze teased the navy banner stretched above the entrance. The Malik Center, a place to begin again. Malik sat in the front row, swinging his feet, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans Daniel had bought. His sun-faded yellow cap, edges fraying, perched proudly on his head despite the afternoon heat. Daniel stood near the podium, speech folded in one hand. Neighbors, former residents, volunteers, and city officials filled the seats. Leonard stood near the back in a borrowed blazer, Jonah beside him, awkward but present. Reverend Elise, Maria, council members, kids clutching juice boxes. It felt less like an event and more like a family gathering that had taken years to assemble. This wasn't about Daniel, he'd made that clear. This moment belonged to them. When the mayor finished her remarks, she gestured for Daniel to step up. Instead of reading his carefully typed speech, he walked to the center, mic clipped to his shirt. 6 months ago, he said, I didn't know Malik. I didn't know Leonard or Jonah. I thought leadership was numbers and deadlines. I didn't understand community at all. He turned, smiling at Malik. A kid taught me, Daniel continued. Malik blinked fast, blinking away tears. I'm not proud of how long it took or of the damage I caused, Daniel said. But I am proud we're standing here now, in a building that isn't a monument to my guilt. It's a promise. He looked over the crowd. A promise that people who were invisible will be seen and heard. A promise that second chances don't come with expiration dates, Daniel added. That justice doesn't always happen in a courtroom. Sometimes it starts with a whisper, a warning, a kid who shouldn't have had to be brave, but was anyway. The crowd stayed silent at first, absorbing every word. Then, slowly, applause rose. Gentle, growing like rain, building to a steady, cleansing storm. Daniel stepped away from the mic before the clapping peaked. He crossed to Malik, kneeling so they were level, and handed him a small, sealed envelope. What's this? Malik asked, fingers fumbling with the flap. Something you earned, Daniel said. Inside was a certificate stamped with the county seal. Permanent custody granted to Daniel Mercer for Malik Mercer. Malik's mouth dropped open. You adopted me, he choked out. Daniel nodded, eyes shining. As of this morning, he said. Malik threw his arms around his neck so hard they both almost toppled. You mean I really get to stay forever? Forever, Daniel said into his hair. No more running. Leonard approached next, shaking Daniel's hand before pulling him into a brief, fierce embrace. I saw Jonah smile today, Leonard murmured. First time in almost 2 years. Daniel squeezed his shoulder. It's just the start, he said. That evening, back at the house, Daniel and Malik sat on the front steps under the porch light. The air smelled of jasmine and distant charcoal from someone grilling down the block. Fireflies pulsed lazily along the hedges. Malik had his treasure box open between them. Inside lay the newspaper clipping, the photo with his mom, the park pebble, a dried flower from the ceremony, the heavy keychain, and now the adoption certificate. Daniel watched quietly as Malik rearranged each piece. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't said anything that night? Daniel asked softly. Malik nodded. Sometimes, he admitted. "What do you think?" Daniel pressed gently. Malik looked up at him. "I think you'd be gone," he said, "and I'd still be hiding behind trash cans. Probably wouldn't talk to anybody again." Daniel swallowed. "You gave me more than my life, Malik," he said. Malik pulled out the yellow cap, turning it in his hands thoughtfully. "This was all I had for a long time," Malik said. "When I didn't feel real, I'd pull it down over my eyes and pretend I was somebody who mattered." He held it out. "Can you keep it?" Daniel blinked, stunned. "You sure?" Malik nodded. "I don't need it now. I know I matter." Daniel pressed the hat to his chest. "You always mattered," he said. They sat there for a long time, listening as night settled soft around the porch. Motion sensor lights flicked on at the yard's edge. A delivery truck rolled past. In the distance, church bells marked the hour, not for a funeral or ceremony, just for time itself. Under those indifferent stars, Daniel and his son finally exhaled, safe and whole. One brave voice can change a whole life. If you've lived long enough to watch neighborhoods rise and fall, you know how quickly people on the margins can disappear from sight. In Daniel Mercer's story, that invisible boy had a name, Malik. 9 years old, thin as a rail, he slept behind trash cans and hydrangea bushes, surviving on scraps and stubborn hope. Yet, on one hot Georgia evening, he did something many grown men would not dare to do. He ran toward danger, waving his arms and shouting for a stranger not to open his own front door. That stranger was Daniel, a wealthy tech executive who had never once wondered who might be sleeping beside his trash cans. For older Americans who remember neighbors knocking on doors during storms, blackouts, or city unrest, Malik's courage feels familiar. It's that front porch kind of courage that doesn't check a bank account or a last name before acting. Malik's choice reminds us that the heroes in our stories are not always soldiers, doctors, or pastors. Sometimes it's a barefoot child with a torn t-shirt and a trembling voice who keeps a man from collapsing alone on his kitchen floor. For those of us in our 60s or 70s, his bravery is a quiet challenge. If a hungry 9-year-old can run toward danger for a stranger, surely we can still pick up the phone, knock on a neighbor's door, or speak up when something feels wrong. Real repentance means repair, not just regret. Those of us with gray hair know what it is to look back and wish we had done better. Maybe it was a son we didn't understand, a brother we didn't reach for, a neighbor we didn't visit in the hospital. Daniel carried that kind of regret over his brother Jordan, who died on the streets while Daniel hid behind checks and business trips. When Malik saved his life, it did more than keep his heart beating. It cracked open his conscience. The man who had built shiny condos over other people's broken lives could no longer say it was just business. He began to see that his decisions had names and faces. Leonard and his son, families sleeping in cars, children shuffled through foster homes. Repentance, for him, could not be a teary news interview or a big donation with a ribbon cutting. It had to look like hard work, digging through old files, facing the man who tried to kill him, listening without defending himself, and then using his money and influence to repair what he could. He helped Leonard search for his boy, turned an old shelter into a place of real safety, and started building homes people like Leonard could actually afford. For older listeners, there's a hard but hopeful truth here. It is never too late to say, "I was wrong," and then roll up our sleeves. Regret looks backward. Repentance walks forward with a hammer, a blueprint, and an open heart. Family and healing can begin long after the first chapter. By the time you reach your 60s or 70s, it's easy to think the major chapters of your life are already written. The kids are grown. The career is mostly behind you, and the doctor's appointments outnumber the parties. But Daniel and Malik's story quietly challenges that assumption. Here is a man who had everything money could buy: an estate in Buckhead, a car so quiet you could barely hear it on the highway, and yet his house echoed with a loneliness no granite countertop could fix. Then came a small boy with a yellow knit cap and a cardboard treasure box holding all he owned. Instead of passing through Daniel's life for one night like a stray cat, Malik slowly became his son. Papers were signed. A key was placed in a little palm. A last name was shared. At the same time, Malik's world widened. He found not only a safe bed and warm meals, but also his mother in a city park, singing with a worn guitar and shaky hope. Daniel did not demand that Malik choose between them. He simply made room. For older Americans who worry that it's too late to mend relationships with their own children, stepchildren, or even estranged siblings, this lesson is tender but strong. Healing doesn't always come wrapped in easy hugs. Sometimes it comes with awkward visits in group homes, quiet rides on the interstate, and small, steady acts, showing up again and again until trust grows back, like grass through cracked concrete. Family, this story says, is not just blood or paperwork. It's the place where someone hands you a key and says, "You belong here," and then proves it in the ordinary days that follow. The second chances we still hold. If you are 65 or older, you have seen enough life to know that none of us gets everything right the first time. We fail people we love. We turn away when we should lean in. Yet the story of Daniel, Malik, and Leonard suggests that as long as we are still breathing, one more sunrise over the porch, one more cup of coffee at the kitchen table, there is room for a different ending. A child can save a CEO. A hard-hearted businessman can learn to listen. A father who once tried to take a life can be guided back to his own son. And a boy who once slept behind trash cans can stand in front of a building with his name on it and know, deep in his bones, that he matters. Second chances may not erase the past, but they can redeem it. The question for each of us in these later chapters is simple. Whose story might change if we are finally willing to listen, to speak up, or to open our door? Friend, after walking through Daniel and Malik's journey of danger, regret, and second chances, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been a Malik, speaking up when it was risky, or a Daniel, waking up late to the harm your choices caused? Or even a Leonard, trying to rebuild after deep loss? Which part of this story spoke most to your own life experience, and what second chance are you still holding in your hands today? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss more stories and life lessons like this.